I'm curious this morning, how many names do you have? And it's not just because I'm overloaded with learning a lot of names in this season, but we have more than one name in our lives. And I think most of the kids who left might have been the ones might have gamer tags in today's world. But we all have names, nicknames of friends, of coworkers, of spouses. We have a lot of names in our lives. And I realized this especially a few years ago when I was trying to pick out the headstone for my mom. And I had never fully appreciated how much more often, a lot more ladies have to go through this in life with taking on new names and trying to figure out what name to put on my mom's headstone. She wanted to be buried next to my father named after our family, Flippin, Arkansas. Flipping all of the things, churches, schools, all of that. But she wanted to be buried next to my dad. And they got married when they were 18, 19 years old, moved around the country. My dad passed at like 48 years old. My mom remarried. And so she was, wanted to be buried next to my dad. I realized the trickiness of that was, well, when you go to a cemetery, you want to find the person that you're looking for, but also you want to honor like their name. And if someone at some point wants to go looking for someone, you want them to find their like legal name or their actual name or however you would be looking for them. So it's like, okay, what if on the back of the headstone it says Flippin, so it looks just like his and you can find the spot, but then on the front it has kind of her full name that she passed as. And then I was thinking through, I was like, well, on the front, how do we honor it? And so it says like widow of, and then it says my dad's name. And then I was like, daughter of, because, there's also maiden names. And then I was like, oh man, I got myself into another mess because her parents got divorced. And I was like, what? I can't shorthand this either. And so it was really kind of cumbersome to come up with that name. And there was something to like finding this kind of like finality of adding kind of the different names to that headstone that made me think of, she would always tell this story when she met my father. They were probably 17, 18 years old. They met on a class trip. She lived in Missouri. He lived in Arkansas. They met somewhere. And she asked the group of guys he was with, where are you from? Basic question. They said, Flippin. She laughed, and they all, that's his last name. And then she said, never laugh at anyone's name. You don't know whose name you'll be for the rest of your life at some point. Names can be funny. Some of the nicknames, especially that we have, can be funny, but not every name that you are called in life is funny because some people don't give you names with your best intentions in mind. Maybe you can think of, middle school or high school when someone kind of put a nickname on you that you really did not want, something that made you feel uncomfortable. Sometimes people give us names we never asked for. And I think about conflict, especially it's dangerous when we move from something someone did to making that their identity, that they are now that thing that they did wrong for the rest of time. And so somebody can be named selfish or difficult, too sensitive, disappointment. There's all sorts of heavy, difficult names that have been placed on us. And so today we're going to wrestle with the question of how do we see someone for who they really are when everyone has an opinion about them? So we're going to be reading from Matthew 16 and seeing how Jesus navigated how people saw him. Matthew writes, now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do people say that the Son of Man is? And they said, some say John the Baptist, but others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. And he said to them, but who do you say that I am? And Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. The word of the Lord for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Now, this text starts a little bit more cumbersome than you might remember it. you might remember this as Jesus asking, who do people say that I am? And of course, it's a little bit more biblical phrase than that. Who do people say that the Son of Man is? You're like, okay, well, why did we say it this way, Jesus? But in Matthew, Jesus is saying the Son of Man a lot, and he's referring to himself. It's like his favorite third-person way to talk about himself, the Son of Man. And so maybe instead of being like, I don't know, it feels a little bit more personal. Who do people say that I am? Who do people say the Son of Man is? And the disciples, I'm not sure if they squirmed or if they felt eager and excited, like who was ready to give their answers? How were they going to tell him what he wanted to hear? But I think Jesus knows people are talking about him. He's not oblivious to that in the story. And Matthew has already told us some very uncomfortable things people have been saying about Jesus. In Matthew 9, some people thought he was a blasphemer. In Matthew 11, they said, hey, he's a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. In Matthew 12, he heals people by demonic powers, by Beelzebul. The disciples do not answer any of those possible options. They filter for Jesus. You know, some people think John the Baptist. Now, a few weeks ago, we heard Herod Antipas have the same thought. He had beheaded John the Baptist. He hears reports of Jesus and he's like, John must be coming back for me. So maybe people like Herod are in mind when they think that maybe Jesus is supposed to be John the Baptist. And others kind of chime in, maybe he's Elijah. Now, Elijah, I love how often he gets brought up and like, well, what might the future be? And is he coming back kinds of stories? Because if you are a fan of any television or movie world in which a character dies but not on camera, they can always come back. And Elijah got taken up in this fiery chariot. Who knows? Maybe he will return. And so he keeps being thrown out as possible answers. Maybe Jesus is Elijah. Maybe he's Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, or maybe he's just one of the prophets. I don't know which one, but he's one of them. The disciples answer a bunch of things that are not insults. They really kind of filtered out the hard kinds of names, but they are incomplete in their assessment of who Jesus is, and the crowds don't understand fully who Jesus is. The disciples don't understand fully who Jesus is. And I think about sometimes when people misunderstand us, it's so easy to become really defensive. Like if they don't know who I am, I got to be really loud about it. I got to be so confident. I got to make sure everybody sees me for who I really am. It would have been really easy for Jesus to have been really defensive. How could they think that about me? Oh, they obviously don't know me. How long do I have to talk to them before they finally realize it? They must be against me. He could have had all sorts of defensive thoughts, but instead he turns to the disciples and he says it very emphatically in Greek. He does the pronoun you multiple times. Hey, you, who do you say that I am? Instead of the public reputation question, the personal relationship of the people who have been with him, who do you say that I am? And I think in the midst of conflicts, you will likely be thrown into things where people have differing opinions of each other and they've labeled each other all sorts of things. At some point, you have to answer, who is the person in front of you? And I love Peter's willing to step up and be the one to talk in today's text. I got this. Spoiler for next week. Come back to see where Peter doesn't have it fully yet. But in this moment, this is like a peak for him. This is like a highlight moment. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Jesus is named by Peter in ways that no one else in the story have thrown out there. Peter brings to the table different ideas. Now, for some of us, we're like, I've said these things about Jesus plenty of times, or I've heard people say this about Jesus, and I have no idea what Messiah or Son of Living God even means. What does Peter mean? What does any of them think about this language? The Messiah, the anointed one. You would anoint priests and you would anoint kings. And some of the first century expectation was we need a new priest, a new temple system. We need a new king, a new political system. For Christianity, throw that together and like, Jesus is all of this for us. He brings people to God. He brings us in our relationship into healing, but he also leads us and guides us forward. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. You might be like, Was there a possibility of the son of the dead God? Why are we throwing living God into this? They're in Caesarea Philippi in this story. It's a political city of sorts. Herod the Great has his kingdom kind of split up between his four kind of descendants. And one of them, Philip, which you might hear a hint of in Caesarea Philippi, decides, I want to kind of get extra power. What if I rename this city after Caesar? I'll throw my name in there too, so you remember who did this. But this is a new place to honor Caesar. He built a temple to a pagan god there. And I think there's a little note in this text that the Caesar of the day, the Caesars were called sons of God. Also, that kind of language that get used of pharaohs. Anyone with enough power gets really big-headed and is certain of their divine status. And I think Peter has a little jab at Caesar or any of those would-be people to say, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God, not the God made of hands, not the marble gods in the temples. You are the Son of the living God. And Jesus finally hears someone getting it right, and he immediately changes the focus of the scene. I think so many of us would be tempted to be like, let me bask in somebody finally seeing me. Thank you. Tell me more, Peter. But instead, he turns it back to Peter, and he says, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. You are Peter. Simon gets the name Peter from Jesus in his journey. That's Jesus' nickname. I don't know about you. I want to know what Jesus' nickname is for me, for you. Peter gets the blessing of that. Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. You are Peter. And Peter is a wordplay. He's like, you are rock, and on this rock I will build my church. But there's something foundational in you and what you've said. And the way that I'm going to go forward moves out of this blessed moment. It's so easy to finally be seen and just be like, let's revel in me for a moment. But how wonderful it is for Jesus to turn and say, you recognize me, I want to recognize you. You are blessed. You are Peter. And then Jesus seems to like word vomit. I don't know. He asked a few questions and he throws a bunch of stuff out at us at the end of this passage. He talks about the church, the gates of Hades, the keys of the kingdom of heaven, a whole lot of binding and loosing. I never use that language anywhere else. And you're like, well, why is all of this coming out here in this moment? So I'll slow it down a little bit. Jesus tells him, you are Peter, and on this rock. I think this setting is right next to Mount Hermon, and it's like a big mountain. And maybe you can see it. Maybe it's this kind of visual of there's something so strong and foundational here that it will not falter. And maybe that'll be helpful for next week when he falters, that like it's not too much of a falter. Like you can come back from this. But the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. The foundation is so strong, even the enemies of God could not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. I think it's really easy to be tempted to think this is a future conversation. Like we just have the pearly white gate kind of image. But the kingdom of heaven is near to Jesus in all of his sayings, and the kingdom of heaven is not some distant thing, but is close. And the gates of heaven are accessible and not being withheld from you, and you can unlock those things. And whatever you bind on earth is bound, and whatever you loose on earth is loosed. I think there's an element of take seriously your responsibility on naming each other. When you see somebody else, are you going to hold them hostage to whatever label of their worst day, or are you going to open them up to a new possibility of who they can be with Christ? There's so many stories about people that get repeated over and over, sometimes the bad stories. There's so many mistakes that become permanent reputations. There's so many labels that just stick. And we don't always give people room to grow past those things. It's true in our family lives. It's true in our workplaces. It can be true in church life sometimes. It's easy to be the person who's, well, they're always difficult. They can't be trusted. They'll never change. And when I think about this question of like, who is Jesus? Who's Peter? Who are we? What is it to not hold people locked into who they have been, but open up the possibility of who they can be. We can't control who people are, even when we try to. You might try to hold a reputation onto someone for good or for ill, but people are bigger than the names that we give them. And that's why I really love the Exodus reading that we read earlier today, where Moses wants to know, like, if I'm going to go, to the Son of God in that time, of like, if I go to the Pharaoh and I tell him, let your free labor go, that's not going to go well. You got to tell me who do I say is telling you to let them go? Give me a name, please, because there's plenty of gods in this Egyptian world. I need to tell him which one. And God tells them, I am who I am, or I will be who I will be. You can get a phrase or a name of sorts, but not one that you can limit me by. You can't control me of like, I'm only the God of healing, as if that's the only sphere I exist in, or I'm just the God of conquest or victory, but I am who I am. Knowing someone's name doesn't give us the right to decide everything that they're ever allowed to be. People grow, people change. Can we see that the people in front of us, we might know their name, but like they're also more than the name? Can we be open to discovering who they are in the story of life? Sometimes we kind of get stuck on old reputations. We don't see people freshly. And I was thinking about in high school, it was a small school. Every year, one of my classmates had a different name that she went by that year. And when it was a small group, like everybody knows. So it's like, I don't know, is she Brittany? Is she Alicia? Is she Britt? I'm not sure. But how easy it is to fall trap into just like, I will ignore who is in front of me and just remember you by how I've known you in the past. What is it to be open to learning who the person is in front of you? To learn to love them enough to let them become whoever they are becoming in front of you. And so when I think about this text, I think about what Jesus invites us into. In the midst of conflict or misunderstandings, it's important to ask questions before you assume too much. It's really easy to think you know someone, to think you know what their problems are, but ask clarifying questions. Who are you? Probably you don't go, I wouldn't use that in that tone. You get in a fight. Well, who are you? But am I understanding you correctly? Try to rephrase it back to them in a way like, am I getting you? What did you mean? What are you hearing me say? Don't assume you already know everything that there is to know in the midst of conflict. And I think the most helpful advice, to bless more than you bind. It's really easy to try to bind people, hold them down, get them to be what you want them to be. But can you have Jesus' mentality of, even in the midst of the high of like, I'm feeling known, bless somebody else. Bless them, celebrate them, let them free, assume very little, ask the questions, and bless more than you bind. Now, if you want something to wrestle with today, I want you to think about who you have labeled in your life. There's got to be somebody that you have reduced to a caricature, and maybe you would never tell anybody out loud that you have done this, but in your head, you have a shorthand for somebody. Difficult, selfish, annoying, hopeless, judgmental, needy, whatever it is. I'd encourage you to drop that binding nickname, at least for a week. Give yourself a trial run of who might this person be if I don't label them too quickly. And in the midst of, if you're interacting with them, instead of like naming them with, well, you're being selfish, you could say, well, what happened hurt me? Or, hey, you're impossible. Hey, I'm having trouble understanding you. Let's not be so quick to rushing to name calling and to binding people under the less than who they have been called to be. Now, I know our lives are messy. You might not know how to evaluate yourself or anybody else around you. You might be in my confusion, like when I was trying to figure out my mom's headstone of like, I don't know which name fits. But the beauty of our stories is that Jesus knows us by name. And Jesus has a name better than whatever names people have thrown at you for good and for ill. Jesus knows us by even a deeper name. John 10 says that Jesus is the shepherd who calls his sheep by name. Others may misunderstand you. Others may remember an old version of you. Others may reduce you to a mistake or a disagreement, but Christ knows you. And if he can give Simon a new name, despite Simon's plenty of failures that are documented for 2,000 years, he can have a new name for you too. Greater than you're willing to say for yourself, probably. And so in the midst of competing ideas of who you are, cling to Jesus, the Christ, the Son of the living God. He's worthy of the name above all names. And receive when he's willing to bless and extend that out to those who seek to follow him, that you are loved and worthy. Cling to Jesus.